A/B testing ain't for settling your team's disagreements. That is my thesis. And I've been doing CRO type work and UX for CRO for about a decade, UX work for about 2, which basically means I've made a lot of mistakes. And one of the mistakes that I had definitely made was using A/B testing to settle teams' disagreements. So I know there's lots of people here from who work in CRO and who work in product. We saw your hands before. So who here has been in a team situation where you're sitting around, you're discussing features, designs you need to add, and people are disagreeing over what we should be doing and what the design should be like and what the words should be like? Show of hands? That's pretty much everybody. Yes, quite common. And what sort of arguments do we hear in these sorts of situations? Somebody will say, that can't be technically done. That's going to take too long to develop. Someone else might say, that's not good design, that's not on brand, that's not going to be slick and good for our users. Someone else says, users don't like that. Users don't like that solution. Do any of these people actually know? I don't think so, but that's another topic. Doesn't often some bright spark then pop up and say, we'll just A/B test it? Has anyone had that experience? Has anyone been that person? Yes. So, what I'm going to say is, using A/B testing to settle those kinds of disagreements is a bit like using a JCB to dig a child's play pit. Yes, it works, you can do it, but you could be doing a lot more with that machinery than what you're doing with it. So, what do we need to do instead? So instead of settling your disagreements using A/B testing, instead of driving your big JCB in, there are other things you could be doing. The first thing is, I think the reason we're all having these disagreements when we're sitting in these meeting rooms and disagreeing, everybody's on the same side of wanting the product to be better. We want it to be better. We want this screen to be better. We want this journey to be better. We want a whole thing to be better. But everybody has a different version of what better is in their head. We usually haven't agreed on what better is. Does that sound familiar? Show of hands? So yeah, exactly. Many people, better for them is it is the clearest, most usable thing for the customers. For other people, better is I get to play in a fancy new code base and use a new JavaScript framework. For other people, better is it runs faster and the pages are served faster. For other people, it's more on brand and I will feel prouder of it when I go home and show my wife and that, or husband or dog or whoever is at home. Everybody has a different version of better. So we're arguing at cross purposes. We all want the same thing, except we don't. So the first thing I'd say you need to do is to agree on what your definition of better is. How are we going to specify what better is? Before we've done that, we can't really have meaningful discussions about what to do with the website. That takes us on to then, what can we do with A/B testing? My big revelation, which took far too long to get to, was that A/B testing is a tool that lets you find out what matters to the users, what matters to your customers when it comes to what is better. So once you have agreed in your team what better looks like, you need to be able to have some way of measuring it. You probably have heard of ideas like single success metric or North Star metric. These are the sorts of things you're looking for. They're not easy to get to because everybody has different ideas about what they should mean. But once you get to those, you can then start to explore the space. Because taking us back to that room where we're arguing, we have Sally's idea versus Carl's idea, and they're both arguing passionately for their design and why their design is better and why their idea is better, their feature is better, we should be doing that now. While we're doing that, we're missing all of the other ideas in the universe that might be better than anything they're suggesting. And even more than that, we're missing that the thing they're arguing about might make no difference at all to the customers or the business or anything. You might be just wasting time, like the people who spend months arguing about what colour to paint the toilets on the side of the nuclear power station. So I would argue we need to first work out what matters to the user, what is better to us, and then we can use A/B testing to explore all the possible ways that can be. Not Sally's idea, not Carl's idea, but lots of ideas that we don't like particularly in the room, lots of ideas that come from somewhere else, all of these sorts of things. I think that was pretty lightning. I would like this to be a bit of a conversation really. because this is an idea that I'm still working out, and it's not an easy thing to do. So, does anyone have any questions at this point? That is a very good question. So the question was, often the definition of better that a team has is quite vague. You could agree that you want to go for faster, you could run around. How do you agree on a good version of better? And I think you've hit on the main challenge there, that actually that is the hard work, and that is why we get stuck in the mire, is that we don't do that hard digging of working out what better means. Yeah, it's hard. I think the thing you need to do is or the thing that I've found that works, is to try to find something, you're looking for a number that is as close to the bottom line for the business as you can get, but without being too up and down variable and too hard to measure, so that you can actually get to it quite quickly. And you need to, so there's two metrics that are important. So one is something that's close to the bottom line of the business. So revenue often is quite good if it's that sort of business, or something that matters to the business. You need to have that. You need to also consider what is good for the customer. What is the thing that the customer can be doing that delivers the most value to them? And try and find a metric that achieves that. So I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm remembering a colleague's talk from the other day who pointed out that actually time spent in an app is not necessarily a good metric. And in fact, when you plot the data of user satisfaction, like user happiness, against how long they spend in the app, for most apps, the longer you spend in the app, the unhappier you are. Lots of time spent, unhappy users. Not much time spent, happy users. The one thing that stuck out on the graph was there's one anomaly, which is Google Maps. People who use Google Maps more were happier. And we're trying to work out what this was. Is this because they're out exploring the world and getting out into space? For Google Maps, perhaps using Google Maps in lots of different places would be a good metric that suggests the users are happy. And it's probably also a good metric that Google Maps are happy for, because then they're being used a lot, and that's good. So if the team can agree on that, then they can start to, instead of thinking about, well, users don't like this, users do like that, I like this technical framework, etc., they can start to step back and think about, okay, so how are all the ways we could get people to use Google Maps in a way that's better for them, that's more interesting, that makes them feel more engaged and happy and everything like that. Does that help?
It depends on, like, as the weeks work out news together, like the microconversions for your site. So you on the time side of things, but when we were looking at metrics for the Sun, one of their metrics was recirculation. So how many times can they get people to go from article 1 to 2 to 3 to 4? Some pages are good at doing that, some pages aren't. For those ones that aren't naturally good at doing that, depending on where they come from, like most of you guys know, if you go to an article from Facebook, you read that one article and you bounce straight back out again. If, I hate to say this, but if revenue is one of your metrics driven by ads, on those single page visits, puts like maybe slightly indexed more on the number of ads you've got on there anyway. But if you know that you've got good circulation, like say for example in the sports section, reduce the number of ads and get people, because you know they're going to click around anyway. When we were working at Photobox, for any of the ex-Photobox over there, Jamie, we found customers going into the creation studio were much more likely to come out. So it's not an indication on a customer metric, but you know that getting a customer into the studio is you're much more likely to get them to come out. But if they're dicking around like with the product pages and with the catalogs and things like that, it's gonna, there are ways to improve that. So I think if you understand the KPIs, and you're probably asking on behalf of hotels, identify what your kind of KPI, micro KPIs are going to be, and understand the value of those is probably the best way.
So the question is, how do you prioritise your tests when you're working with a team that have lots of strong opinions? Yep. That's a very good question, and it's continually a challenge, and you need some way of doing it. The way that I've landed on is to try to prioritise based on how much we can learn from a particular test. So one example for this is, say we take the example that the gentleman over there shared. So we haven't got the insight that fiddling around with the design usually doesn't help, but changing some other thing, bigger things can help. If we So one of the ways you can use A/B testing, I think, that's quite valuable is to do a broad beta test of a particular thing. Your minimum meaningful experiment might be, we're going to change the design and have 6 different versions of the design which all look completely different. And some of them are ugly as sin, and some of them are highly crafted and polished, and the designers are very proud of them, and they're all there. If we then serve 6 versions of the design and they're all different, and we agree, look, they're all really different, and it makes no difference whatsoever to the user, none of them are any different or have any sort of significant difference, then we can say, well, that doesn't matter. That's not a thing that matters, and we can put that down, and we don't have to touch it again. Hopefully, we don't have to have the discussion because people like Qubit have done the report, and it's good. But one of the main ways, actually, if you haven't done all the testing beforehand, is actually to do your qualitative research and try to understand, because the key thing is, when you're doing your optimization, when you're changing designs, when you're testing, it's not really about optimizing the stuff that's on the website. It's about optimizing what's going on in your customers' heads. And if they're not noticing it, if it's not affecting them in some way, then you're not doing anything. It's not making any difference. So you need to understand what's happening in the customers' heads to some degree, as much as you possibly can, which isn't that much given that we don't know what's happening in our heads anyway. But you can get a steer based on doing serious qualitative research to help you to understand what is likely to be important and what is less likely to be important. And then as you start your testing program, you don't just do one A/B test and then call it a day. You do this over months, years. You continue to do it, and you start to get a picture of these things tend to matter more, these things don't matter at all. Let's double down in the areas where we've seen that we can make a difference. And that's the best I've got to so far. Maybe some people in this room who, I know there's some very experienced A/B testers in this room who probably have even better advice. I think that's all from me. Thank you.